we're getting towards the end, but I did want to like get.
Yeah, tell me your virtual porn story.
Yeah, I guess I wanted to get to at least one of the. I mean, this would be a good way to lead into the patrons thing as well, because I wanted to get to at least one of the sort of spicy areas that I sort of looked at, and just sort of give a sense of what this actually involved. And I think in a way, a lot of this example really for me clarifies how the liberal media don't understand these technological changes very well.
The death of God is about the drying up of a horizon of meaning and of a whole form of human life.
Where do we stand in the illusion it makes? What kind of space are we invited into?
The material relations between people become social relations between things. When we look at toasters, corn, and TVs, we
still, to a large extent, live in the interregnum between worlds, if you will, or between paradigms. Not many people in the history of the world have faced that.
Diet Soap is a Sublation Media podcast. Alfie Bown is lecturer in digital media culture and technology at Royal Holloway, University of London. He is the author of The PlayStation Dream World, and he's a culture editor at Sublation Magazine. He's also an editor at the Sublation Press and a member of the Sublation Media team. His new book, Dream Lovers, is coming out from a competitor soon, and it's part of the Digital Barricades series. Alfie,
hi,
welcome
Doug.
to Sublation Media. Welcome to Diet Soap. That you've been on many times before, but it was called something else, I think, the last time you were on.
It's interesting to be on the channel as the guest instead of the host. It's really weird.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You have your sci-fi. I didn't even mention you are a regular host of sci-fi.
Yeah.
And with Elliot Rosenstock, who is an author from Zero. And you've been doing great interviews with people in the realm of psychotherapy and psychoanalysis. And so...
Yeah. No, I want to say that too. I mean, and lots of what we'll talk about with my book is related to this. And every Friday, sci-fi is out on the Sublation Media channel. So if people enjoy this, they should look at that. Like we've had Todd McGowan, we've got Jodie Dean and Jameson Webster coming next. So really the biggest, I think, best in psychoanalysis. So check that out.
Yeah, Jodie Dean is important because she was one of the editors of your book with Pluto.
Our competitors, yeah.
Our competitors. It's your book is part of a series, the Digital Barricade series. What is that series about? Now, what other kinds of books have been in it?
Oh, this is a great series. I mean, that's why I went to Pluto in the end, because it's like sort of media studies and technology studies, but with a kind of Marxist kind of bent. So, looking at kind of computing, video games, media, technology, internet studies, but looking at it with a kind of Marxist approach. So it's the right sort of place for a book like mine.
Great. And was Jodie Dean's book on the kind of platform capitalism? I think if I'm remembering correctly, that's not the title of it, but did she have a book in that series as well?
I don't think so. I think hers is, I don't know, actually.
Standalone.
Yeah.
But anyway, she is a big name in understanding the digital space and the Web 2.0 back in the day, social media, from a left Marxist perspective.
Yeah, she's right.
Yeah. And I've interviewed her in the past, way back in the past. I'm glad to get her back on the channel. It's going to be fun to see her on Sci-Fi. But let's start with your book. So your book starts off with concerns about technology having a right-wing bias. And I'm wondering how you define or understand right-wing. Is that different from having a conservative bias?
Okay, yeah. I mean, yeah. So I did kind of think to talk about these kind of things. So basically, let me say what the book is in a nutshell. Basically, like, okay. One sort of fun way to put it, I suppose, is to say that this book is the story of my divorce.
God! Oh wow!
So, I mean, after I separated from my ex-wife, I was sort of working on this topic and decided to really immerse myself in what I suppose I'd say is like love technology. So I tried a lot of weird things. Sex robots. I went to a sex robot brothel. It was pretty interesting. Tried a lot of virtual reality pornography. I got a virtual reality girlfriend and an AI chatbot girlfriend. That one was way more of a thing. And tried things like smart condoms, like basically digital sex tech. And also the general stuff that is more familiar, like all of the dating sites. I joined Trump.dating. So I tried to sort of dig into some of the weirder and more wonderful pockets of the digital sex world, some of that being quite progressive, some of it being extremely conservative, whatever. But like, I just tried to sort of replace my wife with a robot by whatever means possible. And this book is a kind of exploration of all these different weird things that, from sex bots to smart condoms that exist.
Oh my God. Well, look, it's everything I can do to not just steer off of my prepared questions right into a kind of a bro podcast. Like, okay, let's just share. What was it like for you in this digital love space? Because I also, have been divorced recently. And did you try to convince yourself that this was not just a coping mechanism and rebound reflex and that it was a real sign?
Well, there's an odd question of disavowal and stuff. I mean, on the one hand, I was telling myself, this is all for research. I'm not really doing this,
Right.
But obviously, when you're actually there doing it, it still becomes. And one of the things I found really interesting, which I did write about, was how easy it is actually to enjoy these things and to derive satisfaction of various kinds, or maybe pleasure, or whatever you want to call it.
Now, did you mentioned all these kind of robotics, right? But would you lump in the dating apps with that?
Well, I suppose I was trying to look at this whole spectrum from the very typical things like dating apps and even social media sites, and the way in which they mediate between people and match people up and operate as a kind of mediator in a relationship between two people, right from that to the very weirdest end. Which is where you get into some of the weirder sort of sub-communities using particular kinds of metrics and digital sex toys and data-driven kind of comparisons with each other and so on. And I sort of tried to look at the whole spectrum, really, like the very mainstream stuff that basically everyone's using, and then also the weirder and more experimental stuff that's going on in various kind of pockets and subcultural parts of kind of life today and stuff. And to try and use psychoanalysis as my kind of tool, but also from a kind of Marxist perspective, consider like, what are these technologies serving? And so finally, I'm answering your question, I suppose. What from a Marxist perspective are these technologies? Are there trends here that are going on, that technology in its various weird and wonderful ways is manipulating desire, manipulating sex, manipulating love, manipulating relationships? Of course it is. And who is it doing that in the service of? Is it serving the capitalists? Is it serving the conservatives? How to think this through. Like, we're all changing. Our relationships are changing. Desire is changing, and all of this is changing in as we become these kind of cyborgs of the future who are plugged into technology in millions of ways. But who is it changing in the service of, and why? Is kind of what I wanted to explore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, listen, I'm going to say something right here that we can then clip out with maybe some other clip. Already there's some clips that I know I want to use, but which is that I'm going to hold off in this section talking about this on the personal level with lots of anecdotes, and maybe we can have some of that kind of discussion in the Parrot Room. But for now, we'll
get the juice.
For the juices for the Patreon, but we'll try to be like analytical about it even there. But like I do this question of how robotic are we being turned into robots by dating apps, is I think an open like one worth exploring. And but let's go back to this to your approach to the world of tech and how it intervenes in our love life. I think that's a way to think about your book in a broad stroke, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, you said to save the anecdotes, but this is a safe one. Okay. Like, one of the places where this all started is quite far away from the world of love, tech, and sex. I was actually in Hangzhou in East China. I was at China Academy of Art doing talk about WeChat. And I was slagging off WeChat from a basically very boring, what I now think is quite a boring sort of, Edward Snowden type surveillance culture position, just talking about the way WeChat was a kind of pioneer in new forms of surveillance and so on, and new sort of forms of. Anyway, I was saying WeChat was evil, and at the end of this talk, a couple of guys came up to me in suits, and I was thinking, shit, it's lawyers or something. Couple of Chinese lawyers, I'm going to get myself in trouble. And they sort of said, well, we're from Alibaba. And now I thought, oh my God, I really am in trouble. And they said, oh no, you hate WeChat, right? You hate Tencent. And I was like, yeah. And they were like, well, you probably love us. We're Alibaba. And I was like, no, you're all evil. I hate you all. But they didn't care about that at all. And they said, why don't you come to Cloud Town, which is their version of Silicon Valley hub in the outskirts of Hangzhou. Now, Hangzhou is extremely interesting.
Well, what's the difference between Alibaba and WeChat? What is why would they make that distinction?
So there is a little regional rivalry because Jack Ma, he's the creator of Alibaba. He comes from Hangzhou in East China, which is like an hour from Shanghai on the coast, whereas Tencent is the number one technology company in China. They own WeChat and they own QQ and so on. They're Beijing based. So there is this kind of like regional pride in East China that, their conglomerate is Alibaba rather than the main.
And do they do the same thing? It's basically the same kind of app with the same surveillance.
Yeah. I mean, they started in different ways, but they basically now are rivals. And this is part of what I'm about to say. So I went there anyway to this place. I was getting shown around. It was totally weird. I was taken in a self-driving car and so on. It was like something from the HBO series Silicon Valley. Total shit there. No one was there, but they're obviously extremely proud. Anyway, they showed me all these things. They showed me, for example, traffic lights where they can read how old you are. They count your wrinkles and then decide how long you're going to take to cross a road based on how old you are and things like that. And they're trialing something called the city brain, which is this utopian smart city, which is going to set the trend, set the precedent for how people use their cities in the future, like driving people to where they want them to be and manipulating and regulating the patterns of people's movements of the cities of the future, right? So it's really exciting for them. And the most important thing they showed me, what they said, this guy showed me around, is this car. And this car is made by Alibaba, and it's a co-project with Rover, the German car manufacturer. And I sort of looked at this car, it looked okay to me. And I said to the guy, like, what's the most impressive thing about this car? And he said, I was expecting him to say, it can never crash. It's really fast. It looks cool. I don't know. It can drive itself, whatever. But he didn't say any of those things. He said, well, the car knows when you're hungry and what you might like to eat. And at the time I thought to myself, like, oh, this is nonsense. Why would that be important? These people are mad. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, there is something extremely important going on here. And I asked the guy, why do you care so much about this, knowing when people are hungry? And he said, because we're developing new kinds of predictive technology so that we can make sure nobody in this city pays with WeChat Pay, which is Tencent's payment system, or pays with cash. We can redirect them to places that take Alipay, which is Alibaba's payment system. So the whole logic here is that the car knows, say you like sushi at 4:30 on Wednesdays, the car, you don't necessarily yourself know that the car, that you want the sushi at that time, but the car knows, and it says to you at 4:20, listen, I'm going to take you to this sushi place you haven't tried before. And then you go there, right? There's nothing too radical about this. It's just like how Netflix suggests things or Spotify suggests things or whatever. But it's basically what Facebook boardrooms tech types call nudging, which there's plenty of interesting research on. But it's that predictive technology is not so much there to predict what you want and give it to you. It's to predict what you want and then edit that. It's actually not that dissimilar from the way Cambridge Analytica or companies like Palantir, who basically work in data-driven approaches to elections and stuff, how they function. They work out what the demographic wants, what you through your data, through what they call intimate data, and sex apps and dating apps are the number one source of intimate data. We can talk about that in a bit, I think. But what this story shows, and this is where I got onto it, is that there is a kind of systematic editing of desire to serve particular corporate and current, let's say, platform capitalist interests. So we do live in a world where enormous amounts of our desire for food, for Pokemon, for each other is mediated and existing through these apps owned by just a few companies. And these companies are strategically interested in developing these apps in a way that edits your behavior to suit their own particular agendas. Now, that in itself is kind of scary before you even get into the fact that Jack Ma is a part of the Communist Party. Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google, works at the Pentagon now. You know, there's all sorts of reasons why we should have the alarm bells ringing if our desires are being gradually edited to suit kind of particular agendas, I think.
Okay, so I'm going to, interject something off to the side of your critical point. I'm sorry, but bear with me. And I can't help myself here. But so what I've noticed lately, when you talk about recommendations, the AI recommending things to you, is that YouTube will recommend things to me, on the homepage. You can go to your subscriptions page on YouTube, and the things that you think you want to watch will be there. But then YouTube will recommend things to you. And it will be based on what you've watched recently. So there's a certain mutual, like a reinforcement of your trend already. And I can take a look at my homepage and sort of see what my mental state has been like over the last few days, right? What am I like? You can just sort of see what kinds of things have been on your mind. And so I'm just going to look at mine. It's like, I've got Tenacious D's Tribute.
Yes.
Which I've watched over and over again by myself, and then also with my son. How to Spot Borderline Personality Disorder is next.
But you're right that your data says more about you than you would yourself.
Right, I would know about myself. Carl Pilkington is next.
I do like Carl Pilkington. I love An Idiot Abroad. Really like it.
Right. Yeah. And then next is Flight of the Conchords, Father and Son.
Don't like Flight of the Conchords.
Well, I do. And all right. But Father and Son is a kind of satirical song about a divorced father and his son. And which my son showed me, and then we watched several times. But the point is, I can watch this and see trends. And I went from listening to lectures and podcasts to mostly music over the last couple of months. I've noticed, and I would be fascinated if I could take a look at the entire history of my recommendations, more than even what I actually watched, right? To see how am I doing? What's going on in my psyche? I feel like you could really figure out, I especially knowing myself could figure out quite a lot about how things have been internally. And I'm reminded, if you ever seen a movie called Until the End of the World?
No, I haven't.
It's this 1991 movie, had William Hurt in it. It was a Wim Wenders film. It was like a road picture, took place all across the world, set in 1999, came out in 91. And at the end of the movie, they get this machine that will record your dreams for you and then show them to you on a screen.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone becomes narcissistically addicted to watching their own dreams. They don't care about their actual life anymore. They just want to see their childhood memories recast in stream imagery. And I feel as though maybe something like that can go on here too.
I think that's right. And I think, broadly psychoanalytically speaking, this point you make about the recommendations is more interesting or more eye-opening to you than your own history. That's an interesting point, because what that shows is that, because when you look at your own browsing history, you can explain why you did what you did, right? But when you look at your recommendations, you can't add that narrative to it. So you have to actually diagnose the symptom and think, okay, so what is it in me which allowed this a recommendation to be made or whatever? But I think if that rings true, to just make a point out of it, if that rings true to you, I think it should also set the alarm bells ringing again, because it shows that this works. And there's no question it does. I mean, intimate data, as I said before, this is another sort of tiny little example I wanted to give, is the example of Grindr, the dating app Grindr. This is one of the most interesting dating apps that there is. It's one of the only ones which isn't owned by IAC, who I'll show you their building when we're in New York for the launch of our magazine, which we're supposed to start talking about online.
Oh, right. Yeah. On June 26th, we're going to launch Sublation at Project Portal. Yeah. Everyone who's in New York should show up there. Everyone who's anywhere near New York should fly there. Come by foot. Come by car. Come by taxi or Uber or Lyft.
Not by Uber. No, that's part of my.
No, not by Uber.
But no, the building is there in Manhattan, and it looks across. It looks like an old sort of white spaceship. It's horrible. Anyway, the Match Group, they're called. They own everything you could possibly name, really. Tinder, Hinge, Bumble, but also some of the niche ones like Christian Harmony. And also some of the historical successful ones like OkCupid, Match.com, Plenty of Fish. They were all housed under one roof. Now, this itself is quite an interesting fact because it shows that what ostensibly look like different things with different marketing teams and so on are actually run by the same kind of logic. And if you look at the algorithm, anyway, it's another story. The algorithms are kind of shared between these apps, which is quite interesting. But the point I want to make is through Grindr. Grindr was one independent. It was one of the only ones which wasn't Match Group that was successful in the US. It was then bought in 2016 by this Chinese company, Beijing Kunlun Tech, which is a games company, augmented reality games company. Now, this is amazing. And there's some great journalism done by this gay guy, Evan Moffat, who talks about the experiences of being a Grindr user. And it was almost like augmented reality before augmented reality, because people would meet up for dates, for sex, for orgies, whatever, and they would stay on their phone for the whole experience, collecting credits, points, interactions through the phone while having the date, while having.
Oh my God! Really?
2009, let's say, and it's which is historic compared to it's before.
This is like Pokemon Go for this. This is like my novel. By the way, I was disappointed because. When I got your book and I did a search through it, my name's not mentioned. Neither is my book. And I think that you talk about gamification.
That's true. But I mean, I did write about your book in The Guardian.
Yeah, I know. But I paid you for that. But no, I did not. But anyhow, the point is that, yes, that is, I just have to, I cannot imagine a better thing than that for one of these dating apps, because what the dating app wants, I've met someone through a dating app. We are now like in a relationship just with each other. We're not dating anyone else, right? We put the dating apps aside. I stopped, I canceled them all. I'm not paying for any of them. None of them are on my phone, but I still get emails from them from time to time. I don't know how to turn that off, and it will be like, they want you, Doug, did you know Wendy liked you? Come take a look. Who's Wendy? Aren't you interested in Wendy? And it's like, okay, well, no, I'm not going to click on that. But also there's definitely the dating apps are not there to help you find someone. They're there to help you continue to look and find someone for a night maybe. But not to.
Well, I mean, let me come back to that because I do have an argument to make about that particular point. But just want to quickly finish on the Grindr thing. So, I mean, the way this kind of.
But if you can turn it into a game, so you aren't even looking for someone for a relationship. You're looking for something in app like this. Yeah. Like the people become characters in the app rather than people exactly you're trying to. Yeah. That's like the dream scenario for these.
Well, exactly, that's it. And I tell you the other thing that's interesting about Grindr in this regard. In 2000, like I said, it got bought out by this gaming company. Now that shows that the connection between gaming and dating is central. But that's not even the end of the story. I don't know if you remember this in the news, but Donald Trump basically panicked when China got this app. And like the Trump administration, and Trump was public about it himself. They were basically pressuring China to sell the app back to the US. Now, the irony of this is fucking mad because, the Chinese state is dreadful with LGBTQ plus stuff, whatever, and you've got these, so you've got these enormous state powers, one homophobic president over in the US fighting this kind of traditionalist, homophobic state in China over this gay dating app that they both kind of trying to grab from each other, whatever. And, it's a fascinating story because it shows that, culture wars and the ideology of cultural values are basically worth nothing compared to like the economic power of this thing. And
I'm not sure I would describe. I hate to say this. Now, maybe cut this out. But Alfie, what has Trump done to earn being called homophobic? He's like he came into the Republican Party and said, "We have to, welcome gays into the party," and I'm glad to have said it, and it should have been said earlier. And I mean,
was probably not the right word. I mean, to be honest, I'm not anti-Trump, so I'm not the person to pick this argument with.
I'm anti-Trump, but I don't know about that. But nonetheless, I think now see, I'm going to cut this all out because why do I care? Call him whatever you want. Go ahead. But
I don't need to cut it out because it's right that some of this liberal language that gets thrown around isn't based in stuff. So I shouldn't just say Trump's a homophobe if he's not. So,
but certainly a homophobic party, traditionally homophobic party.
What I'm saying is what's in, and that's not even part of this story really. What is part of this story is that it sounds like a comedy that the Republican government is fighting the Chinese state over Grindr, this gay dating app.
Right. I think obviously it's not about like wanting to champion the rights of homosexuals.
Yeah. It's because the data works. It's an enormous source of powerful, intimate data, and this is the answer to your question about why does YouTube recommendations know more about me than I know about myself? Because this does work, right? So that's what you're sort of dealing with. Yeah. Now,
but I feel like you have to interpret it. So my question is like, I can look at this and knowing how I've been feeling and kind of things that have been going on, I can make meaning out of this. But can they know like who I am? Would YouTube's algorithm be a better therapist to me than my actual therapist?
But I think it's interesting that you also talk about. I mean, in your own. The way that the dating app, your view, it doesn't want to give you what you want. It like, for example, Hinge has this. I don't know if you did your girlfriend on Hinge, but
it was Bumble. It was Bumble. Okay.
But Hinge has this advertising tagline: the app that's designed to be deleted. Now, that is obviously not what the app is, right? You wouldn't build an app that was designed to be deleted. I get that it's just a marketing campaign, but there is a point there that clearly the logic of these things is, well, it's really what Todd McGowan thinks about as the promise of capitalism and the ideology of promise, that basically the promise that you're being sold at the level of ideology is you're going to find happiness and not need this thing anymore. But the structure of the thing itself is designed to guarantee that doesn't happen so that you keep coming back again and again and buying and buying and buying and so on. So in a weird way, this example, this way you described dating apps is also this kind of critique of capitalism that kind of Todd McGowan's made, I guess, that it taps into your desire precisely through this kind of fulfillment promise thing that, I can't say it as well as Todd, but it's a classic argument of his, I guess, that's relevant there.
Right. So, right now, do you think? So, let's say that there was some reason why a state would want to use the algorithm to hook people up into secure, long-lasting relationships, rather than in this way in which you play a game and you collect points, and one of the points you can collect is a partner for the night. In a gamified Grindr world, right? What if there was a desire for the state? The state would use the app to get people to delete the app. Get married.
I mean, I would actually possibly say that I've got an example of this. And again, it comes from China. There's a really interesting app called Baihai, which is it's based on a certain kind of credit score called a Zima credit score, which is an Alibaba thing, but it's actually based on an American model. So it's not one of these things you can say, look at how mad China is. But, and basically this, in a way, this is quite a scary app because what it does is it uses your credit score. And this credit score is really amazing. I mean, anyone interested in China should look at just even the Wikipedia page for the Zima credit score. Starting with X, but and it's got different metrics. One of them is like connections. So one of them is like just money. So basically, if you're rich, you pay your debts, then you get points. But also, there's like if one of your friends is arrested, you can lose points. If you're like pictured at a protest, you can lose points. There's all this kind of network of things that it uses to kind of gauge this and score that you get. Now, this dating app Baihai, it knows what the most possible the best matches for you are, and it only allows you access to those matches if your credit score is above a certain point, if your Zima credit score is above a certain point. So it's essentially designed to reward good citizens, good capitalist citizens, whatever you want to say, by saying that, you know, the fulfillment is available, the fulfillment in the sense that the people you match with best, your best chance of love, of settling down, of staying together, is available, but only if you first go through this kind of successful citizen test, which is gamified. So there are young people, some of my friends, my old students from China, they check it every day, and they take actions to build their score. So they're actually playing a game every day and building up points, and they think that at the end of this, they'll get good matches on the dating site and get married and settle down. And in Chinese culture, you do get married and settle down. So this actually is part of the logic of the app. It's not like Guardian Soulmates where they'd rather you were single forever. It's like a whole gamification of the ideal form of Chinese life. First, you become a good capitalist, then you get married, then you settle down, then you delete the app. You know, that is what it's doing.
Right.
So
And that, okay, so that I'm.
This is about my book.
Oh yes, that's right, your book, which is called Dream Lovers, and people should definitely read it. And a good companion piece will be my novel, because but so right, and this sounds dystopian in a way, and it is certainly dystopian under current conditions, and because weirdly, you don't really want to be put in the position by a machine of being a permanent libertine with shallow relationships and no one to settle down with, no real camaraderie, no real companionship. But on the other hand, you don't want to be locked into a relationship that's sanctioned by the state before you decide you want it, right? I mean, you don't want to be set up. We don't want to return to arranged marriages, only instead of mom and dad arranging them, it's the algorithm and the state. And so neither side of this sounds like actual freedom, right? But on the other hand, like the thing that's really driving the difference in the aim of the algorithm is the need of the overall totality of the state and the economy, right? We don't have the same needs for people to settle down into permanent relationships in the consumer economy of America, as the Chinese do in the productive economy of China.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. And I think just a quick answer this one on the point you made about arranged marriages, because I think one of the reasons why psychoanalysis is important in understanding how we relate to these things is it would never seem to you as an arranged marriage. And this is at the heart, actually, of how this technology functions. It's not saying, actually, look, leave it to us and we'll give you a better life. It's important that it affects you in a way that you think you've made the choice. Yeah, and this is actually kind of similar to, I mean, I know it sounds mad, but Pokemon Go players or whatever, who you mentioned that was like Grindr, and it is, the whole logic is like, look, it's there, you can go there if you want, and the way that they teamed up with different kinds of other places to drive traffic to McDonald's, to drive it to malls, or whatever. You do see this, but part of the logic here, part of the trick, let's say, is that you have to feel like you chose it. It's weird. I mean, we know on the one hand that Netflix and Spotify are curating our tastes for us, but we still think on the other hand that it's our own tastes. Now, I think this is the problem in a lot of ways, that it is an arranged marriage, but it appears to us as something that's organically emerged.
Yeah. Okay. But on the other hand, the big psychoanalytic insight, and certainly the insight of like Todd McGowan and Zizek, would be that our desires and our tastes are always produced out of the society that we're in.
Exactly.
And are always mediated.
Yeah.
So this is the difference, is what's the mechanism mediating our desire, rather than, it's not like we've gone from a moment when we were freely choosing and cultivating ourselves and our tastes to now this controlled one. It's that we have a different mechanism of control.
Yeah, and this is exactly one of the things I wanted to do, which is less fun to talk about, but part of the book is exactly this. I mean, so I looked a little bit at, like, for example, literature as a kind of force of, Nicholas Luhmann, this fantastic book, I think it's called The Coding of Society or something, but it's written in the 80s before we would talk about coding in the way we do now. It's not about that. It's about how literature played a role in codifying relationships, and then Hollywood cinema plays and film plays a role in setting the terms and codes of relationships. And now I'm thinking about, in my book, the ways in which current sex tech and relationship tech that plays this role of recodifying society. So it's not that desire is possible in some free and, as you pointed out, some free and unmediated way, but the forms of mediation change throughout different periods of time. And at the moment, we're in a particular moment where basically the internet is the mechanism through which desire is being codified. And so to try and kind of explore what that means in relation to power structures around it, and
it seems like it's liberating and transgressive. And I'll tell you a story from a Verso party to illustrate the point.
Like all good stories, this one begins
at Verso, another competitor. So I was at a Verso party. I attended the Left Forum a few years back, and I went to a Verso party, and I'm hanging out, having a few drinks. I think I met up with someone who, a couple of people who knew the YouTube channel for Zero Books at that time, so it was fine. Yeah, I was recognized. It's always what I like. But then this guy walks into the party, and no one knows him, and he has really nothing in common with anyone there, not on the surface. It's like, hi, so, are you a writer? No. Are you an editor? No. Are you an activist? No. Are you a leftist? No. I'm not anything. Well, why are you here? And so, my computer told me to come here. and you're like, what? And he says, I've set my computer to give me a destination every night, pulled at random from the available databases, and I just do what it tells me to do. And it suggested that I come to the Verso Love Party.
That is subversive. I agree.
Yeah, and
it's a derive. It's kind of tech the board, right?
A little bit. Only instead of the architecture guiding you, it's some sort of code that he himself programmed to randomize his experiences in the city.
Yeah. So, no, that's what I was saying. That isn't. I mean, on this,
but dating apps are similar, not the same, but similar because.
No,
Well, I'll tell you why. Because, I know you don't think they are, but there are some ways in which they break. Look,
no, I have the answer to this, but you go ahead. Yeah,
I'll tell you why. Like, okay, first of all, the data that he collected was not actually just completely random, right? It was from it would be like in a way, it's probably already a little bit recommended. These things, right? Somehow, but to talk about the dating app, like I'm dating and in a relationship with someone who lives in Lake Oswego. I live in downtown Portland. I would not have interacted with this woman any other way, and our cultural milieus do not mix. She doesn't have friends. We don't have mutual friends. We don't have. She's been here a long time. We don't even go to the same restaurants. The matter of blocks apart of where we would have ended up when she did live in this neighborhood, and she did for a little while, she didn't go to this part of this neighborhood. Like we just aren't, would not be by the old mediating forces of the city and of the career.
Yeah.
And all of that, we would not have met, but through the internet we have, so it crosses all these, it breaks through all these.
I'm going to answer that. Yeah. Okay. Let's see whether this does turn out to be a success story before you start using it as the.
I'm not saying it's a success story,
but no, I do have.
But I'm romantic. I believe, look, in the parrot room, we'll talk about my anxieties here that you've raised. But
no, I want to answer the point, and I also want to tell one spicy story for the non-patrons first about virtual reality pornography. But let me answer this point first. Which is that I agree, and this is exactly the logic of the book. And in my book, which I'm not, whatever, I can say it now, so you don't need to buy it. But basically, what I'm interested in is saying that this radical potential of the internet hasn't yet died. And, in the 90s, I talked with Dwayne Munro about this on the channel the other day. In the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, the internet had this enormous potential to break out of these kind of bubbles and allow us to kind of meet people from a completely different kind of world. Suddenly you could communicate and so on, and this was really taken as quite a utopian thing in the first instance. And the internet seemed extremely promising and subversive in this way. I still think that it's worth holding on to that kind of concept of the internet in this way, and the way you kind of described with dating apps. So what's happened is, as corporations with their specific reasons to divide people try to gain hold of this space and start to regulate and organize this digital space in new ways, it presses out that potential of the internet to be this kind of opportunity to meet a diverse range of people and live outside of your normal ecosystem. And it becomes instead a project which is based on grouping people precisely into ecosystems which are manageable and which are controllable. So that's why something like Guardian Soulmates can exist and Trump.dating can exist, because and this is why Facebook, Brexit happened because people in the UK didn't see any information on social media from people who thought differently to them, because their algorithms were curating information and basically creating what people call filter bubbles, cyber balkanization, or splinternet. These are the kind of media studies terms for it. So, yes, there is this enormous potential in the internet to break out of our ecosystems and allow us to generate new forms of relationships outside of what we're expected and projected to do. But it isn't currently being used like that. And so in my book, I also made some really silly, playful suggestions of like how the left should use technology to try and go back to that kind of utopian idea. So, if you had that experience for your dating app, that's great. That's a remainder of the possible radical potential of the digital space that still exists, that hasn't yet been grabbed by the power holders. So I celebrate that new relationship and hope it goes well. Yeah, we're getting towards the end, but I did want to get.
Tell me your virtual porn story.
Yeah, I guess I wanted to get to at least one of the. I mean, this will be a good way to lead into the patrons thing as well, because I wanted to get to at least one of the sort of spicy areas that I sort of looked at and just sort of give a sense of what this actually involved. And I think in a way, a lot of this example really for me clarifies how the liberal media don't understand these technological changes very well. So one of the things I did was go to these